Hi guys, TotallyDubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review for this Hisense TV. Now the TV in question is the Hisense H43AE6100UK. Now this is a 4K HDR TV that comes in at the time of making this review at £279. Its normal RRP price is £329, and that's the price I'll be basing it off simply because it's the Black Friday deals right now. Now, without further ado, let's go straight into it. So let's talk about build quality and design. Now the TV itself sits on two sort of little pedestals. It's absolutely fine, it's no problems in terms of sitting on top of a TV stand. You can also wall mount it if you so wish. At the back you'll find a set of holes, and therefore you can drill your holes into your wall and wall mount it if you so wish. In terms of inputs and outputs, it's actually got 3 HDMI inputs. So 2 of these are 4K HDR 60Hz inputs, in other words the full HDMI 2.0 spec. There's another HDMI port which carries a 4K at 30 Hz, which in other words is HDMI 1.4. You've got optical and you've got 2 USB ports. Then you've also got composite cable video input cables if you've got more of a legacy device, let's say a old DVD player or an old Xbox if you so wish to connect it. So in terms of inputs and outputs, it's got everything you'd expect. And in terms of wireless connectivity, it's got Ethernet, which you can directly plug into your router, or it's got a Wi-Fi 2.4 GHz band. I couldn't find a 5 GHz band available, so it is only available at 2.4 GHz, which is perfectly fine for most households. I think that's the normal frequency band that most people will be using with their routers. Now, in terms of build quality, I must say, other than the stand and other than the inputs and the versatility of having it wall mounted, I quite like that Hisense have used a pretty thin bezel and a pretty thin design overall. The TV is not only light to pick up, I don't know why you'd want to move it, but it's light to pick up but also quite thin. It doesn't look like a chunky TV. So for about £300, you're looking at a pretty nice and pretty well designed TV. It doesn't have metal stands of sorts, it's all plastic and black everywhere, but nevertheless I've got no complaints. Moving on to the remote. Now the remote is pretty big, however it does provide a full suite of options. You've got quick sort of selections to your favourite apps. When I say favourite apps, that's YouTube, Netflix, Freeview Play and Amazon. And then you've got the normal buttons that you'd expect. It's not a smart remote, so you can't have any voice control on it, but it is a bog standard remote that provides all the options that you'd want. And it looks pretty nice, and to be quite honest, Hisense even use a similar remote for their flagship £2,500 TV, so it's nice to see it coming down to this price range. Now in terms of the interface, again, Hisense have done a good job, especially at this price range. They've kind of integrated what you would get in the flagship models and brought it down to a more budget range. You've got a complete suite of apps, and of course you've got Freeview Play built in, so you can browse the games, a variety of different things that you find on Freeview Play through the home screen. And the way that the interface is laid out is very simple and yet very intuitive. It's not missing anything that I would want. That also includes the setup and even the menus. They're very much easy to understand and very easy to get your head around. Playing around with your settings will, you get to customize it yourself. So I have to say, in terms of that, I've got no complaints, and Hisense have done a great job. Now moving on to the actual performance of the panel. So before talking about picture quality, I want to talk about sound quality. So before I give you my opinion, what I'm going to do is play a clip, and you'll be able to see me flicking through the sound setting options and to see what you guys think about it. As you're able to hear, the sound did actually make a difference, especially when you enabled Total Sonics I think Hisense have done a good job in sort of equalizing the speakers, and also Total Surround actually works pretty well for a TV of its size, should I say. It's not the best in terms of overall raw sound quality, but the Total Surround will give you a little bit better immersion, especially when you're watching movies. Now, in terms of your settings, obviously it will completely vary depending on your setup and your preferences. Personally, I found that using the default EQ and Total Sonics enabled got me the best sort of sound quality. Now, in terms of the actual volume of the TV, I was very impressed and also a little bit concerned, because even at 2% volume, I felt it was a little bit too loud when I was watching TV at night. It's not to say it's really too loud, but if I wanted it, like, let's say at 0.5 rather than at 2%, and at 1% it was, you pretty much couldn't hear it. Even at, let's say, 10%, the TV was very loud. So you can imagine when you get to around 50% or so volume, you're going to be really, really kind of blasting out a lot of sounds. It's not to say it's great quality sound. When you start getting the volume up, it does start distorting a little bit, and you do hear a little bit of clipping that occurs. It's pretty much accustomed with most TVs or monitors built-in speakers, so it's to be expected. But yet, I think Hisense have done a great job. Again, in terms of its price range, it does a decent job. Of course, a little cheap soundbar, which is around £40–50, will get you much better sound quality and fidelity, but it's acceptable out the box, especially at its price range, to be listening to the news, or just looking at, say, full music and looking at the top hits. But just don't expect the premium best quality sound coming from this TV, or almost any TV, but especially in terms of this budget TV. Just have your expectations set in line. And now we move on to the panel quality, the picture quality, which is arguably the most important part of the TV. And I must say, out of the box, even without any calibrations, I was pretty impressed at the results. It's not to say it's going to be a flagship TV and it's one that's going to perform amazingly in terms of its brightness capabilities, color accuracy, and in terms of its contrast ratio, but for a budget TV for under £300, I must say I was pretty impressed out the box. I didn't feel that the colours were overly saturated, were overly washed out, or were horrible to look at. But there are certain things that Hisense could improve, or something that you might notice if you have it yourself. So let's talk about its flaws for starters. So in terms of overall brightness, now I know Hisense say that it's a HDR TV, but in all honesty, at a maximum nit of 175, it is not what I would qualify as a HDR TV. I would need at least 400 nits, if that, to be qualified for a HDR standard. Of course, it can play back a HDR signal, so it's a HDR 10 and HLG compatible TV, so it will show a HDR source, but it's not really going to be hitting the requirements of HDR, if that makes sense. So you're going to get a high dynamic range, but you're not going to get the nits that are really needed to showcase HDR. Whereas the Samsung Q9FN, which is right behind it, it's around 2000 nits, and of course there's a massive price difference between the two. Or even Hisense's flagship 75-inch hits 2500 nits, and to me, I would say for a TV you'd be looking at 400 to 1000 nits is what you'd be looking at for a proper HDR image. So I wouldn't call this a real HDR TV, but it does accept a HDR signal. Now, in terms of its 4K capabilities, when you play a 4K source on it, it looks absolutely fine. However, when you play a 1080p or 720p source on it, or even lower than that, what you'll notice is the upscaling capabilities of this TV aren't fantastic. It does look a little bit grainy, and it does look a little weird. So when I was playing back terrestrial TV, I wasn't too impressed with it. But then when I put a 4K Blu-ray player, which almost cost half the price of the TV, then suddenly I really experienced beautiful 4K resolution. So bear in mind that the upscaling capabilities aren't fantastic. They're absolutely acceptable, but they're not fantastic. So it does automatically try and upscale it. Now, in terms of the actual picture itself, I must say, there is another thing that some people might notice, especially if you start watching a lot of dark scenes, is that there's quite a bit of backlight bleed, and it's because it's not a full LED lit display. It's got edge lit LEDs around the side, and therefore you can see backlight bleed occurring all over the panel. It's not to be, again, overly concerned given the price of the panel, or the price of the TV should I say, but nevertheless it's something that you should just bear in mind if you're going to be buying this and been watching a lot of dark films or watching it in a sort of dark scenario. You might notice that light bleed. However, in a bright sunlit room, I don't think you'll have any problems. Now, in terms of the overall brightness, which I talked about in the HDR section, so 175 nits, I think it's perfectly acceptable. Obviously, I would like it to be a lot brighter. If you're in a bright sunlit room, I think you might want it to be a little bit brighter than it actually is, but it is perfectly acceptable. I didn't find myself even with all these lights on, and I know it's at night time I'm recording this video, but even during the day, I didn't really feel myself, oh, I really need more brightness. And in a dark room, I think it was perfectly acceptable. So again, it's all relative to the price. For the price, I think it's perfectly acceptable. If you compare it to more expensive models, then you would say yes, well, if you're in a brighter room, you're going to need a brighter image, but then you're going to need to spend more money in order to do that. So it's all relative. Now, in terms of the actual picture quality, first of all, viewing angles, didn't have too many problems with that. There is a slight shift in terms of the overall color accuracy when you look at it at more extreme angles, but it's nothing to be concerned about. Also, in terms of viewing angles, it's a semi-matte display, so therefore you're not going to get too much glare occurring on it. So I wouldn't worry if you've got a lot of sunlight directly hitting it. In terms of the actual picture, so in terms of the color accuracy, it's not the best. It doesn't hit the full DCI-P3 sRGB or Adobe RGB standard. I don't know why you'd be using those standards when you're watching TV, but nevertheless, it doesn't hit the full scale. But it's perfectly acceptable yet again in order to deal with your average terrestrial TV images. It's just not going to get you the best image that you can expect, and that's why people pay more for a better panel, or one that has a better motion processor or picture processor. Now, speaking about motion, I must say that it's got no sort of motion capabilities or motion processing built in, not like the Hisense flagship model. And I must say, if I was watching sports, or someone who loves watching sports like myself, you'll feel that it's a little bit jittery at times, or just has a bit of trailing or a little bit of ghosting occurring. So for example, when a football is being kicked really fast, you'll sort of see a little bit of a trail behind it. Again, it's to be expected at this price. You can't expect a TV for £300 to have perfect motion clarity. However, as you'll be able to see currently, in terms of my motion test, there's no obviously glaring problems. It's just that when you compare it to more flagship models, you notice the limitations that this budget TV has. So overall, what do I think of this TV? And in all honesty, at £300, I don't think you can really go wrong. If you're looking for a 4K HDR TV and you want smart features which are built in and you can connect to the internet, for example, right now I'm on the YouTube app and I've got my advertising my own YouTube channel, also mainly because I don't want to get copyrighted from any other channels or any other people. It's absolutely perfect. It does what it says on the tin. You can connect up a 4K box to it, like a Now TV box, and have 4K streaming to it. You can have a 4K Blu-ray player to it, or alternatively you can watch normal terrestrial TV in non-4K resolution and be perfectly happy with it. So if you're looking for a £329 or £279 TV, then I can't really say I've got any complaints about it. I think it does what it says on the tin, and it's actually pretty decent in terms of the overall picture quality. It's not got any glaring problems, let's put it that way. So if you want a decent purchase, check in the link in the description below. You'll see all the specs, the buy links and everything like that you can find about this. If I find any other links, or for example for other territories, I'll be sure to put them down there. And if you've got any questions, make sure you ask me down in the comments below. I'll try and give you my thoughts. This TV has to go back now. It's going to be packaged up after making this video, but nevertheless, if there's any questions, there might have been certain things I've gone through or I've glazed through that you kind of want more details on, be sure to ask me. I'll read every comment and I'll be sure to reply to it. If you like the review, make sure you like it, or if you like the TV, then like it, of course, and then subscribe, favorite, share. Always helps the channel grow, and I truly appreciate it. Alright guys, I've been Totally Dubbed. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review, and more than anything, take care. Bye bye.